And going into that a little bit, so as much as I talk about fighting games and I love fighting games, back then my passion wasn't really fighting games. I mean, it was probably my second passion for fighting games, or for video games. But my first passion was something else. Before that, as far as 3D fighting games go, I did play Ballerina Toshinden, but the other 3D fighting game I did play, which was not that long because it was only on Saturn at the time, and I kind of just had a little bit of practice. I'd seen it at like a local Sears. I played it on the Sears like demo station, right? But I still played a little bit of it. And that was Fighting Vipers. So Fighting Vipers is it's a little bit weird. I think I liked the character that had a skateboard on his back, just because I thought that was neat and fun. But yeah, Fighting Vipers. So that's kind of a little piece of history. Fighting Vipers there. Little bit of an intermission for fighting games though. As much as I loved fighting games, there was one game, one series, one genre that kind of was a bigger passion for mine at the time, and that was RPGs. So I learned RPGs, I learned about them with this one right here. This is Final Fantasy II, which is known as Final Fantasy IV in Japan. Final Fantasy II showed me that you can have story in games that you just really couldn't have had anywhere else. And when it comes to Super Nintendo, RPGs were kind of my big thing. So Final Fantasies, like Final Fantasy II, Final Fantasy III, even Final Fantasy Mystic Quest here. Final Fantasy was really big for me. Earthbound was a really big game for me. Both Chris and I, my sparring partner, loved Earthbound. We played the hell out of this game. We were both really into Super Mario RPG, and a little bit, but not as crazy, for Secret of Mana. So that's kind of, Super Nintendo's RPGs were kind of my bigger thing back, instead of fighting games. Yeah, Earthbound, I know. Oh yeah, Chrono Trigger for sure. I actually don't have a copy of Super Nintendo Chrono Trigger. I do have for PlayStation Chrono Trigger, but not Super Nintendo. I'll probably get that eventually. Well, you know how I mentioned that we're pretty much, that was it for PlayStation 1, because the ports were just not that great. We weren't too into it. PlayStation 1, for me, the bigger thing was, again, more RPGs. We all know, of course, that Final Fantasy VII came out on PlayStation 1, and this was my life as a kid. 4th grade Nathan was so into Final Fantasy VII. You wouldn't believe it. 4th grade Nathan was so into Final Fantasy VII. And I remember reading on PlayStation Magazine about Final Fantasy VIII, and we were so excited. We couldn't wait for Final Fantasy VIII, right? So we ended up, we got like the fantasy, Parasite Eve had a Final Fantasy VIII demo disc, I believe. We got some Final Fantasy VIII. Oh no, no, it wasn't. It was Bushido Blade. Bushido Blade had a Final Fantasy VIII demo disc, so we got that just to play that demo disc, and we were so hyped for Final Fantasy VIII. It was gonna be the biggest thing in the world, right? So we got Final Fantasy VIII right here. It's not a great game. This is actually the greatest hits. So because it's green, it's kind of melding with my green screen. I wouldn't believe it. And I was so into those games back then. Oh, NYC Furby, you're picking the right one. I had Lunar. I was really into Lunar. I was really into Chrono Cross. And just again, real quick for her RPGs, this game literally changed my life. Like, religiously changed my life. Like, I'm not even joking. This game fully, completely changed my life, Xenogears. And I still use an avatar for Xenogears to this day. My original fighting game handle was id, which is based on a character from Xenogears. And Xenogears is an absolute masterpiece. If you're into fighting, or if you're into RPGs, you absolutely have to play Xenogears. You have to. You have to play Xenogears. That's all I'll harp on for Xenogears. For now, this isn't a Xenogears show, but I do own 3 copies of Xenogears, just because that game literally changed my life. It really did. And I'm not going to go into how it did, but it was more of like how I see the world, and how I see religion, and all sorts of things like that. Literally shaped by Xenogears, like no joke. Really good game. Enough about Xenogears though. After Golden Sun's fun. I'd love to get back into it. I didn't beat it. I did play it. I've got just a massive library of RPGs that I haven't played yet. Like I've got over 100 RPGs on my bookshelf here, and I've only played. I've beaten a total of 54 RPGs at this point, and I'm working on Legend of Dragoon. I had to quit Final Fantasy III, like actual NES Final Fantasy III, much to my own chagrin, because I was getting pretty far, and then my save data got corrupted, and I would have had to start the entire game all over again, and I hate Final Fantasy III, so I said, fuck that. So, I'll have to go back into it at some point, but, I don't like Final Fantasy III. NES Final Fantasy III. Hate it. But I'll go back to it at some point. I need to beat all 10 Final Fantasies. And, I haven't beaten Final Fantasy III, the original, and I haven't beaten Final Fantasy V yet. Those are the last 2 of the 10 that I need to beat. I've beaten Final Fantasy VII several times. Xenogears I've beaten 4 times. I try to purchase a new copy of Xenogears every time I go to play it. But yeah, so Legend of Dragoon is the one I've been currently playing. And if you guys are interested, I might do that every Tuesday. We'll see. I'd like that. That'd be fun. You guys are gonna hate me for that question. What's your favorite Final Fantasy so far? Of the 10, because there's only 10 Final Fantasies. Of the 10, Final Fantasy VII is my favorite. I know, Final Fantasy VII is my favorite. 6 is my second favorite, but I love Final Fantasy VII more. Well, so alright, so I wasn't sure, right? I had beaten Final Fantasy VII, I had beaten Final Fantasy VI. It was between the two, and I didn't know which one it was going to be. So in college, I went and I played Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy VII back to back, right? To see which one of those two is better. I actually put Chrono Trigger in there too, so I played all 3 of those to see which is best of all of them. I feel like Final Fantasy VII is the best one. Final Fantasy VII, what did it for me, because it wasn't always like that. 6 definitely has its great moments, but what did it for me is I didn't like the ensemble cast of 6. It felt like I wasn't following a full story. Following, you know, this thing, and then that thing, and that thing, and it was kind of jumbling around. But the Celeste part where in 6, when you're, like, after the world's destroyed, and you're Celeste. That whole scene, I didn't know they can get by without saving Sid. I don't want to go over too many spoilers, but that scene was really, really good in 6. But 7, the scene that did it for me in 7 was there's a point where, in, what's the place? Madril, I think it is. Where Cloud is a complete comatose vegetable. And they tell Tifa, like, hey, you know, this is gonna be him for the rest of his life. You're gonna have to take care of him like that. It's like, oh shit. And then you go into his mind, in Cloud's mind, and you go through the past about how much Cloud has actually been brainwashed and all this other stuff going on. That part right there, that was the one that kind of did it for me, where I'm like, okay, this game, Final Fantasy VII really kind of went deeper than 6 did. That kind of did it for me the most. When you see the flashback moments between Cloud and Zack and them running away, that kind of stuff, where you realize in 7, the whole point of 7 was that Cloud looks like this total badass, but really he's an imprint, and he's not even there, he's just some phony. And a lot of that kind of stuff, that was really, I think that kind of story element design was really good. I really like that. So I do think 7's better than 6. 7 was not my first RPG. Final Fantasy IV was my first RPG. I loved Final Fantasy IV, but I do not think it's in the top 5 Final Fantasies. As bad as that is to say, I love Final Fantasy IV, but there's at least 5 Final Fantasies I like more than 4. Yes, there's only 10 Final Fantasies. Final Fantasy Tactics is the one you're probably thinking of, is just a side game. I wouldn't really count Final Fantasy Tactics as a mainline Final Fantasy game, but yeah, only 10. I did play Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. Again, that's just a side game too. I wouldn't really count that as a Final Fantasy. But yeah, so other than that, there's just the 10. There's just 10 Final Fantasies. Let's see here. Your favorite one is Final Fantasy 1. Final Fantasy 1 actually has a pretty cool ending. There's some pretty cool stuff in Final Fantasy 1. I know you guys are probably, if you haven't played Final Fantasy 1 now, you're not going to play it. But it starts off where it's like, oh, I'm just in a fantasy world, ha ha ha, this is kind of fun. And then you realize that this whole world was actually like a destroyed world that had existed well in the past, and people lived in the sky with like all these futuristic abilities. It's like, wait, this is a fantasy, right? And then like you go to like this upper world where everybody's already been dead, and like you go to this like ruins, it's all been flying up in the sky. And then you find out like that Chaos, this beast that you've been learning about, that's kind of going to be destroying everything, like actually worked in the past with the story elements that you've done already. It's like, this is actually way better than I thought it was going to be, right? Final Fantasy 1 is really mind-blowing at the end, exactly. I do like Final Fantasy 2, like NES Final Fantasy 2. I liked Final Fantasy 2. Final Fantasy 2 had a lot of really good stuff. So Final Fantasy, okay, so we can talk about 12, 13, 15. First off, you know, 11 and 14, not Final Fantasies, they're MMORPGs. We're just going to get over that. They should have called it something else besides a number, but they're MMORPGs. I'm not going to count that at all. Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X came out in 2001, and Final Fantasy X was the greatest Final Fantasy of all time in sales. So they'd been building up. People loved 7. More people bought 8. More people bought 9. More people bought 10. 10 had the highest sales of any Final Fantasy of all time. Then, nothing. Why wouldn't they work on Final Fantasy 12? We'd been getting Final Fantasies almost yearly. 97, and then 98, and then 99, and then 2001. So we were getting Final Fantasies almost annually. And then 10 comes out. And then 12 comes out in 2006. 5 years later, and we hadn't had a single Final Fantasy. And not just that, it plays completely different. It's not even a turn-based RPG. It's like they took the MMO from Final Fantasy 11 and just made it one player. What a load of crap was that? I couldn't stand Final Fantasy 12. I actually liked the music in 12. The story was decent. I liked the Final Fantasy Tactics world of Ivalice. I thought the judge system was kind of cool. I liked the world presentation, the world building, but the gameplay was not Final Fantasy at all. I'm very into turn-based RPGs, and I hate the stuff where it does stuff automatically for you like that. And 12 was all about that. I did not like that gameplay at all in 12. And I quit, just flat out. I'd been a massive Squaresoft fan and supporter. Then when 12 came out, no, I'm done. I'm completely done. That's it. I didn't like 10 that much to begin with, but 10 was still way better than 12 was. Way better. But I felt like 10 was kind of the worst of that decade, of 1991 to 2001. That 10-year gap from 4 to 10, I feel like 10's probably the worst one of those. I didn't even play 13. I didn't even play it. I gave up after 12. I'm like, no. This is it. I'm done. I'm completely done. I didn't play 15 either. I've got so many other RPGs to play on my docket. I'm not going to waste my time with 13 or with 15. 9 wasn't too bad. I don't know about FF8 being a waste of money. I really liked FF8 for the first 2 discs. The ending of disc 2 was really good. That was where you have the garden battle. I thought that was really cool. I mean, I don't even count anything after 10 as an actual Final Fantasy game. We can count 10-2. I mean, I actually think 10-2 is not that bad. I know it's crazy. The storyline was shit, of course, but the gameplay of 10-2 was actually pretty cool. You know, you have Final Fantasy 3 for NES and Final Fantasy 5, which are both job class based leveling up systems. And 10-2 brought that back, so I really liked 10-2's gameplay. I thought it was really cool. I liked how well it flowed with your movements and everything like that. So 10-2, I had a lot of fun with. I liked 10-2. The story was horrible. The story was god awful for 10-2, but the gameplay was pretty fun. If they'd made that gameplay for Final Fantasy 12 instead and had like the gameplay, you know, almost the same, I would have loved Final Fantasy 12. The gameplay was the only thing that did it for me. I just couldn't stand it. I don't know why Squaresoft went away from turn-based RPGs when their greatest selling RPG of all time was turn-based, and they'd been cranking out great turn-based RPGs throughout all of Super Nintendo and PlayStation, and then just flat out, damn, we don't want to do it anymore. Here's Kingdom Hearts, which is an action RPG. Here's Dawn of Mana, which is another action RPG, like the Bouncer. 12. What are they doing? I don't know what they were doing, what they were thinking. I had a lot of fun with the Bouncer, but only for bad reasons. Only for bad reasons. But I think the downfall of Square Enix was mostly the movie. Yeah, there you go. You beat me to it. The punch there, Lexi. It showed up right there when I mentioned it. The movie lost them millions. They were on top of the world, and they made that movie, and that movie lost them millions. And I think they were actually bought by Enix at that point. So it wasn't that Squaresoft bought Enix. Enix bought Squaresoft. The Squaresoft was so in the hole. Yeah, Spirits Within. And don't get me wrong, I was such a fan of Final Fantasy back then. I had Final Fantasy glasses kind of thing where I just couldn't see anything other than how great Final Fantasy was. So I loved Spirits Within when it was out. But in retrospect, it was not a great movie. 12 is horrible. That was the 12. But yeah, so if you guys are interested in RPGs, you guys are asking about RPGs. Maybe I'll play them back. I would love to play more of these RPGs on Tuesdays. Yeah. I've already beaten Chrono Trigger, so I don't really want to play it again. I've beaten it so many times already. I'd rather focus on games I've never beaten before. So Legend of Dragoon is what I've been working on right now. But every time I'm done with one of these, I kind of take a vote for what the next RPG is going to be. So if you're interested, then we can take a vote on the next one. I've beaten Phantasy Star 1. I have not beaten Phantasy Star 2. When I first tried playing Phantasy Star 2, I actually made a very critical mistake, and I didn't realize that you get new characters at your house. So when I was playing the game, I'd gotten really far. I was like, man, when am I getting a new character? I know there's more slots. I'm going to get one eventually. And I got really far with just the 2 characters. And I was like, man. And then I go to my house, and I just for the first time gone to my house. Because there's no point. You don't restore anything at your house. You don't do anything at your house that's necessarily important. And when I went to my house, you get, knocks on the door for people who want to join your party. I was expecting people to join my party in the story. Like what Final Phantasy Star 1 does. Phantasy Star 1, you get people to join you in the story. But when I finally went to my house, I'd unlocked every single character in the game. That's how far in the game every character was unlockable. I'd gotten that far. I was like, wow. Wow, this sucks. And I quit the game. I quit it at that point. I was like, alright, yeah, whatever. Alright, I'm done. I hated that. I'm not really a big fan of ARPGs. I feel like they're a lot more brainless. I know it feels kind of like the opposite, but action RPGs, it feels like you're just pressing the same button over and over and you don't do anything. I'd rather have an action game than an action RPG. I love action games. I love Contra. I love Gunstar Heroes. I love Metal Slug. I love a whole bunch of different action games, but action RPGs, it feels like a weird mix that I don't want to be a part of. Chrono Trigger is a great game. I agree with you there. It's probably in my top 5 RPGs of all time. Probably number 4 in my top 5. Chrono Trigger is a great game. It really is. It is the greatest RPG, I think, where the main character doesn't say a word. I'm not a fan of the whole silent protagonist in RPGs. But Chrono Trigger is the best one that has a silent protagonist, I would say. Yeah, I don't like silent protagonists. Like in Xenogears, for example, the main character has a story. He has a family. That family had a history. He meets people. you know, the main character falls in love, he meets other people, there's betrayal, there's other stuff that has to happen if the character has a backstory that is impossible to do with a silent protagonist. You can't have a great story like you have in Xenogears in Dragon Quest because the main character is silent. It's just not possible. No, Lexi, the reason why I don't like Final Fantasy XII is 100% just because of the battle system. If the battle system were turn-based, I would probably like it a lot more. It's 100% the battle system. I couldn't stand the battle system anymore. I had to quit the game. I actually have not played any Shin Megami Tensei games at all. I'm interested in getting into them, but it's a little overwhelming because there's like 33 of them or something like that. Yeah, I would be interested if I got into the Shin Megami Tensei series. I would want to start with the Super Nintendo ones first, not the NES ones. Maybe the NES remakes on Super Nintendo, but the Super Nintendo ones is where I'd want to start. I'm okay with bullshit. Depends on what it is, though. Not a fan of Fire Emblem, which has a lot of bullshit in it. But I love tactical RPGs. But yeah, I'll come up with a poll. So what I'll do is I'll choose after Legend of Dragoon. I'll start playing RPGs on Tuesday. See how that goes. Before I was getting like 1, maybe 0 viewers, so I kind of stopped doing it on stream. But I'll start playing Legend of Dragoon, and if people keep watching, then I'll keep playing. But if not, then no big deal. I'll just do something else on Tuesdays. When I finish an RPG, I'll always take a vote on what people want to see for the next one. So usually what I like to do is give you a choice per kind of generation. So I'll have like an NES type generation, a Super Nintendo, PlayStation, PlayStation 2. And one of those 4, I'll pick one of each and kind of put it out there. And have an example for you guys to play, or to request from me. There's some stuff where it's like I'll want to play, but there's no way anybody would want to see me play those games. Like the Saga game for Game Boy, like original Game Boy, Saga 2. I want to play that, but nobody's gonna want me to do that. There was Japanese Super Nintendo. Oh, Live a Live. Live a Live is great. I played a little bit of that. I'd love to get into Live a Live. I'd love to play that game. But I also want to play RPGs that I actually own. Whether it's through a repro card or something else. So I don't own a repro card for Live a Live. I will eventually. But I would put that on my list until I own the actual RPG. I've got so many that I already own. I'd rather put one of those on the list first, really. It is a fan translation for Live a Live, but it would be a repro cart of the fan translation. So I would want to get that. I want to get a repro cart of Final Fantasy V with the fan translation. Same with a lot of these censored RPGs for Super Nintendo. So I would actually like to get a repro cart fan translation of Final Fantasy VI from Japan. Because there's a couple scenes that are censored out of the US version for 6. Same with Earthbound, there's a few little sprites and things here and there that are kind of censored out, so I'd love to get Mother 2 for Super Nintendo. Yeah, I think it's like... It's a scene... Yeah, there's a scene or two in Final Fantasy VI that they censored out of the US version. So I'd want to get like a fan-translated version of that. Mother 1, I do actually have the repro cart for Mother 1, the Earthbound version. So I've actually played Mother 1. I love Mother 1. I have not played much of the Sailor Moon RPG, but I would like to try it. I'd also like to try the Ranma Half RPG for Super Nintendo. That'd be fun. As far as Mother games go, and you guys might want to tear me apart on this one, of course Mother 3 is the best one. I think we can all agree at that. If you played Mother 3, you know that game is just an absolute masterpiece. But I think that Mother 1 is better than Mother 2. Again, I grew up with Earthbound. I grew up with it. Like, we played it when it was out, and we loved it back then, because it was something different. Everything else was like a fantasy or a sci-fi. This took place in 1990X, you know, in the year we were there. But replaying Mother 1, after I played Earthbound, I was like, whoa, this game is really good. And I think Mother 1 is a lot better than Earthbound. I think some of the best stuff of Earthbound, they stole from Mother 1 at that point. You know, they just kind of recycled a lot of their content. But if you want to see, like, you know, how much I love the Earthbound series, I've got a copy right here, Earthbound. So there we go. I have a copy. Not my most expensive game, I'll tell you that. Mother 3 is really good. Mother 3 is really good. I would say Mother 3 is better than Chrono Trigger. It's that good. Mother 3 is better than Chrono Trigger. I would have a hard time saying that Mother 3 is better than Final Fantasy VII. Again, I did not grow up with... I did not play Final Fantasy VII as my first RPG. I played tons of other ones before Final Fantasy VII. I do really like 7. I know a lot of people kind of feel like that's taboo, but there's a lot that I like in 7 that they did really well. And nothing's going to be Xenogears in all of eternity. Xenogears is... it shouldn't even be on a list, really. It's unfair for everything else.